This is Marc Mullinax, and I welcome you back to Power for the Peaceful, our verse-by-verse class and tour of the Tao Te Ching's 81 verses, one episode per verse. Today, verse 58, the light touch.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
The same thing we do to cultivate ourselves is what we do when we cultivate our world. And among the arts we cultivate, the most subtle of all is honesty. It is all one needs. When we embrace the truth, the world enjoys peace. When we turn our backs on the truth, the world suffers. From the time before recorded history, this has never varied. Huang Wan Chi.
Good to be back with you. I hope you're all well, or on the way to being well. We in Western North Carolina are still dealing with the aftermath of a very destructive hurricane-induced flood a few weeks ago. Some of my neighbors are so affected that they are having to rebuild from scratch, and some are just leaving the area for good. Last episode of the Tao Te Ching verse we considered, 57, prompted a generous discussion about the roles of government and the governed. Natural disasters, we saw, tend to focus the roles of each, showing both the power and the weaknesses of government and rulers. Our natural disaster had local, state, and national governments attempting to triage an area and its people with generous but still limited resources. And the governed are still coming up with new ways to be neighborly. We'll see this theme of government roles again and again because we're now in a, quote, season, unquote, of Tao Te Ching verses on leadership and government. Verses 57 through 67 each address the good leader, the ideas of what is a good government and what or who really is government for. So I recommend you're reading these 11 verses for yourself soon, 57 to 67. One more note. In this episode, I treat the current hurricane and flood crisis in Western North Carolina as a natural event because, yes, there have always been hurricanes and floods, but the increasing severity and number of such in our recent past points to a most unnatural set of interrupters that enable these weather events to be more frequent and more violent. The federal government issued two disaster declarations for floods in 2000. So far this year, it has issued 66. Lao Tzu did not deal, however, with rising global climate change and its local consequences, but his advice to remain centered and at peace so one may govern better, that remains unchanged. Today's honored guest is Kimberly Mason, who was in a recent short course on Taoism with me at a local Unitarian Universalist congregation. Kimberly, please introduce yourself in any way or ways you wish.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Mason. I'm a resident of Asheville, North Carolina, and mom to 3 daughters, ages 13, 23, and 25.
Thank you very much. Kimberly, I'd like for you to start off by reading a comment by a local leader. An interesting view on how good government can work. One that can get us back into the swing of Tao Te Ching's understanding about how good government is supposed to work. Our city's mayor had these words for her constituents, us, yesterday.
The idea of community care must extend to everyone affected by the storm, particularly our seniors, who are often the most impacted during times of crisis. I was once a volunteer coordinator for Meals on Wheels, and it gave me a first-hand look at the difficulties some of our seniors face daily. Challenges like mobility, access to food, and maintaining their independence. Now, in the wake of this devastating storm, resilience is not just about rebuilding infrastructure. It's about ensuring that every individual has the support they need to recover. Esther Mannheimer.
I have another quote. This one from North Carolina's governor, who uses a key Chinese word here, humanity, or in Chinese, ren. Humanity is used 8 times in Tao Te Ching and hundreds of times in Confucius's main text, the Intellects. Humanity in Chinese means to be near to or akin to, suggesting ethical behavior by which one treats everyone like you treat your own family. So listen to North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper a few days ago.
If you ever lose faith in humanity, all you have to do is spend half a day in Western North Carolina after this disaster. You'll get it back.
So, Kimberly, there are 2 government leaders in the United States recognizing that good government depends upon the humane nature of leaders and of people. Have you borne witness to good government, Kimberly? Any thoughts you may have?
Well, I have talked to a number of people who have been very impressed by and grateful for the help from FEMA. And I work at the VA Medical Center, and I know FEMA has been a presence on our campus assisting people with applications for financial assistance.
So, now, Kimberly, it's time to get to our verse. Would you please read it today?
Verse 58, A Light Touch, Part 1. Governing with a light touch keeps people healthy. Meddling with a heavy hand is hardly governing, just a means to turn people into needy connivers. On top of every calamity, good fortune roosts. Sown in every good fortune are the seeds of disaster. But all life is a gamble, just chance through and through. Today, the straightforward veers into perversity. Tomorrow, goodness U-turns into the monstrous. These puzzlements seem without end. So the sage governs without controlling. She is sharp without piercing, honest, but not to a fault, single-minded without being ruthless, lustrous with understated brilliance.
So let me begin, Kimberly, asking how are you doing in our tough, to use the word from our verse this time, our tough calamity? Have you seen, again using the words of verse 58, good fortune roosting?
Absolutely. The line, on top of every calamity, good fortune roost, really resonates with me. I can't help but think of all the amazing help we've received since Helene. Just the other morning, a group of volunteers from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Winston-Salem worked to clear our yard of debris. And a couple of days ago, I got a special treat. I went to the circus, the Venardos Circus. And I learned there that the circus gave away 2,000 tickets to Asheville area folks. They had to work harder to bring their show to Asheville, but they really wanted to bring some joy to the region. And then another wonderful thing that's happened, a nonprofit called Water Step has set up a water purification and distribution system from our neighborhood creek. And when I volunteered there, I got to know neighbors that I didn't know before. So yes, Helene has brought good fortune for which I'm very grateful, even while she brought destruction and suffering. And it is a puzzlement, I think, as you called it in the verse.
So, Kimberly, you just talked about puzzlements, which is a word in our verse today, and I'm glad you did. Few are the places where Lao Tzu and Tao Te Ching, like in today's verse, just seems to throw up his hands in the air and say, in so many words, I really haven't the foggiest idea of what's going on here. We're in a foggy cloud where few things can be known for certain. But I think he advises us, no matter, I have a mind or heart, a plan, if you will, to imagine how to get through it all. So, How did Lao Tzu prep himself to get through the puzzlements of his day? His advice can be our practice. Don't tie your brain, heart, or destiny to the first obvious things our battered brains throw at us. That is, don't believe your thoughts. Life is always difficult to penetrate, so test your thoughts for relevance and truth. And then stay loose, breathe, stay resilient, for the future will be about as vague as understanding our current reality. And that's okay. Sages, Taoists, they don't know any more about the puzzling situations. They just know how better to frame them. Staying in touch with Tao day by day, moment by moment, helps the sages to help us to see how everything is ever and always in flux, flowing, not static, not hardened. He or she will teach this by modeling, more than by issuing edicts or proclamations. Stay ungrasping and spontaneous with regards to outcomes, Lao Tzu advises, and yes, one can ride the waves of life with increasing expertise and confidence, but not with cocksure certainty. Because what the sage leader is trying to do is to govern a large area after a chaotic earthquake or a devastating hurricane. What we need is common and cooperative decision-making. Remember, Wu Wei is basically cooperation. Remember our examples, cooperation with a sticky key in a lock, or cooperating with a headwind by tacking your sailboat, or cooperating with a riptide so you don't get carried out to sea, but you just let the force of that riptide wear itself out, and then you swim home. It's cooperation. Practicing life's major ups and downs with a Taoist sense of cooperation with what is, that can bring us the confidence that we'll be okay. Now, in the middle of this teaching, Lao Tzu puts in a strange thought. After his first 25 words that advises governors not to be heavy-handed, nor issue edicts that are so out of touch that turns folks into conniving citizens, Lao Tzu then pens a 46-word paragraph where he engages what we call it in modern philosophy theodicy, Theodicy. Theodicy is the explanations or rationales we use when bad crap happens. There are good theodicies and some very bad ones. Bad theodicies abound and are usually overheard when someone dies or the unexplainable occurs, when well-meaning folks who should know better come up with all kinds of self-satisfied reasons why tragedy happened, every one of them a spiritual bypass or spiritual shortcut. Things like, God wills it. It's God's mysterious will. Oh, it's part of the plan. It was their time. Heaven has a new angel now. They're in a better place. Whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Each one is a conversation-ending cliche. None solve the puzzlements to which they refer. Kimberly, do you have your usual suspect of awful sentiments that people use with good intentions but really don't help?
How about God never gives you more than you can handle?
Oh boy. Taoism's theodicy does not explain good or bad and does not promise happy endings or rose gardens. It just promises that we can be freed from all cliche prisons of thought and speech, even these popular phrases that well-meaning people say in bad times. Cliches are mostly ignorance trying to be certain. About the conditions of life, we can never be certain. We can never predict. No one can ever say, the Tao is on my side and life will be always good. Doesn't work like that. The Tao is in neither the assurance business, claiming willy-nilly that everything will be all right, nor in the insurance business. All Lao Tzu promises is that we'll see good emerging from bad, and in good times, well, expect to see not so good things come about. What you're working on, my dear class, is recalibrating our expectations. We meet our every situation with constancy and steadiness. Too much yin like a drought, or too much yang like a flood, is part of this constancy. It's steady, though. We know these times of yin and yang happen, and we can develop practices of the mind and heart in Taoism so that we can be nimble and resilient during times of little and the times of too much. These things just are. So Lao Tzu is teaching and modeling flexibility and living free of unreal expectations or outcomes. These are Tao's abiding promise. Outside, all hell may be breaking loose, but inside, we are resolute and prepared. Now, a Taoist sage is not aloof, but he enters the puzzlements and confusions with us. Sometimes, when it seems the world withers and the Tao fades,
Sages move through the world with an empty self and accept the way things are. Hence, they leave no tracks. They do not insist that their own ideas are right and accept the words of others. They do not care about life and death, much less profit and loss. Therefore, the wise join the dust of others and soften their own light, and they leave no trace. Ching.
So, in life's yins and yangs, we find our Taoist practice. We practice seeing silver linings in hurricanes and floods. We know that equally, good weather and good times contain their undesirable parts too. They are there. But let me be very clear. No one sends hurricanes and floods or the so-called good stuff to teach us a lesson, just so some deity can share some silver lining hallmark poetry with us. For in every upward turn of fortune, the practiced heart expects downs, and every downward turn of luck, the practicing heart sees ups. These puzzlements seem without end, but the sage assures us we are not being taught lessons. The ups and downs are just uphills and downhills on the roads of life, or tailwinds and headwinds along the way. That's all. No lessons intended. But notice, where is the sage leader? Right there with us, in the thick of it all, adjusting the welfare of the people to tragedies and good fortune alike. So let's face it, we all like to be on top of life's wave, all alone, feeling good, in the spotlight, not feeling life's undertow. I like to be seen, recognized, and stroked, but this is not part of Tao's program. Tao evolves and enables the conditions and processes of the world. The attitude of the Taoist is gratitude for what is, and then working with what is for change. When Hurricane Helene finally made it to us, we could not do a damn thing about her wind and rain. But as Kimberly has testified already, we can be resilient enough to offer aid and assurance. Weather changes, I call them, to our neighbors. We can be government to others.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
The mistake of loving and praising, fearing and despising, does not rest with the people, but with those above. The reason people turn to love and praise or fear and hate is because those above cannot be trusted. And when trust disappears, chaos appears. Sung Chang Hising.
Now, this previous discussion about theodicy revolved around the middle 46 words of the verse. Before these words and after these words, that is the first 25 and the last 25 words of our verse, they all unite thematically. That is, good leaders have a light touch, tell the truth, and are not control freaks or easy cliche brokers. The good ruler is all at once, but not overly much, honest, sharp, single-minded, and lustrous. The sage just does her work and then retires from overthinking, overteaching, over-reminding. The sage is not excessive, she's understated, not obvious. Too much pressure on the governed or the parented child can create unwillingness, even rebellion. Too much ego is hardly a place from which to govern or to parent.
When those above treat those below with dishonesty, those below respond with deceit. Ho Shang Kung.
Instead, Lao Tzu offers us a sage who governs with, quote, understated brilliance, a skill that does not bring attention to oneself. Good governors or parents Do not make a display of their authority. Do not push for recognition, which is very much unlike a king or queen requiring constant, bowing obedience. Tao leaders are content to remain in the background, unrecognized, because that's where Tao has always worked and always worked best. You ever notice when a leader operates without force, people or children, they have nothing to attack. When a parent or the government is laid back, everybody's relaxed. When a parent or the government is nitpicking, everyone's anxious. Both being controlling and being laid back are not just mental, but also spiritual, like wars. Whether mental or spiritual, physical illness or health follows. Instead, the Taoist doesn't try to control. She does not desire to increase what others call the good, nor add to what others call the bad. She just observes. She's ready. Her baseline is unruffled calm. She just observes and then accompanies, and everything necessary is accomplished. All this reminds of that, please.
Verse 17, no traces. The best leaders leave no trace of their governing among the people. The second best are known by the love of the people. The third best are obeyed through fear. Then come the despised and reviled. It is obvious when a person does not trust himself, he hardly inspires others' trust. The leader's words are few, but each is priceless. Whatever she promises is a done deal. After her accomplishments, everyone says, it all happened naturally.
Thank you. And I think that it all happened naturally, for me, is the pinnacle of Lao Tzu's teachings about the proper role of government, to be so much in the background and not obvious that people just say, well, we did it ourselves. It all happened naturally. Now, Kimberly, I know you have a particular focus or question for our verse. It's a verse that seems like it's about good governments with good leaders, but I'm also interested in your experiences as a ruler, a parent. What does this verse say to you as a parent, as one who is, quote, above, unquote, your children? How does a Taoist parent lead? Is it by example, by presence, by teaching their children how to learn for themselves? For example, what are your thoughts when setting up a phone policy for your children?
That's a really challenging one for me. I find that I have a anxiety that drives a lot of my actions, unfortunately, and all things digital technology and everything that encompasses, meaning algorithm-driven, engagement-based social media, artificial intelligence, and that sort of thing, they seem really overwhelming to me, and they make me nervous, and I want to protect my children from these things. But this is the world we live in. When my 25-year-old and 23-year-old were much younger, smartphones existed, but smart parenting around smartphones was not widespread. I did give them smartphones when they were 14, and I thought if I waited until they were 14, that's all I needed to do, and I was finished at that point. So I gave them phones and pretty much just turned my back, no guardrails. Well, they did get into some trouble with those phones, and I think I have a 13-year-old now, and I want to do a better job parenting her in this area. So I'm trying to resist the urge to just restrict all access, because I don't think that's realistic or wu-wei, so to speak. So what we've come up with is that she has a flip phone, which I think is a good alternative for kids and teens. And I hope that will become a new norm eventually, that kids and teens have flip phones instead of smartphones. But I'm also mindful of my phone use in front of her. I want to set a good example. And we have frequent conversations about the internet and digital media, and just, how one can hurt themselves or other people if they're irresponsible in that arena. So we do have a lot of conversations. I think I learned something from how things went with my 2 older children. But my question, I suppose, is how might I use the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching to navigate this tricky area? I want my child to learn responsibility, but I don't want her to be overwhelmed or injured.
Oh, you're asking someone who has had a teenager, but many decades ago. First, I would ask, are you engaging the help of your 2 older daughters in this venture? What lessons would they tell you? Mom, you did it this way right, that way wrong. When you go to our youngest sister, maybe here's a good way to approach it. So maybe spread the authorities around. A second one, not knowing your 13-year-old at all, could you engage her in a kind of covenant or contract? Nothing signed or anything, but just a way in which your daughter has some buy-in to what she's able to do with her phone and not to be able to do with her phone, so that she says, okay, I okay this. This is part of my agreement too. So there's some buy-in. So I don't know, would that be something helpful at all?
I think so, for sure. And in fact, I have consulted with them, not on smartphone or flip phone management, internet accessibility for their little sister, but other things too. And they have been very helpful. They have a lot of wisdom to share, and they're also, I appreciate that they are kind to me about it. They're forgiving. They know that parenting is a challenge, and that there's some things I could have done differently, and I think we, possibly better. But they're really kind and show me a lot of grace on those fronts. So I'm grateful for that.
The other thing would be about our own behavior with phones, and that is that we don't, for example, if you have a time limit at nighttime when your daughter cannot do it, you should observe that too, maybe. I had a family on this show not too long ago, and they all take digital breaks every Saturday by choice. And if everybody has got the same rules, then who can complain there?
I love that idea. I do try to model behavior, and I try to be kind of conspicuous about it. So I have a no phones upstairs rule, and we're pretty good about that. When her friends come over, I ask them to leave their phones downstairs, and if they're going to go up to her room, I try to just remain aware of what I'm doing. Sometimes she and I will watch things together on the phone too, so we'll share the experience. I think that's also helpful.
Okay. My only other thing is, if something really terrible in your mind happens, how then do you react?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I did with the 2 other girls, the 2 older girls. I just took the phone away. So, and it is.
I bet they love that.
They did not love that, that's for sure. But I don't know. I think there'd be more conversation and more exploration together, rather than just me reacting by removing the phone. Yeah. So. I think just in general, I strive to be less reactive, because I've found that when I let my anxiety take control, we usually end up in a place I'm not happy with. So.
Well, fortunately, this verse 46 is for us, because those middle 46 words says, no matter what happens, even if you think that everything's going well, something's going to go south.
Right.
And even if things seem to be going south, there's still some northward signs there. So I guess the Lao Tzu's advice to us rulers, parents, is to learn equanimity or resilience in all situations, so nothing surprises us. And then when your 13 or 14-year-old daughter then becomes, when something happens, okay, how do we fix this together? Maybe something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, her two older sisters trained me well. They put me through quite a bit, and I think they prepared me for for their little sister. I hope. I'll ask them how I'm doing, and I'm sure they'll tell me.
Did that get to all their questions or thoughts that you wanted to get out today?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think this verse is just wonderful for anyone who's trying to govern or parent.
Yeah, I don't see much difference between governing and parenting. They are conceptually the same. And I don't know which is worse or harder. So Kimberly, I'm really appreciative of all that you brought to the table, to this podcast today. Your wisdom and questions are both spirited and inspiring models for me, maybe for other people. So homework, folks. What are our conversation-destroying theodicy cliches? It's always something, or they're just ignorant. Catch yourself saying what you sometimes say often and examine that phrase's usefulness and wisdom. Where did they come from? What are you really trying to say with them? Finally, Kimberly inspired me to pen a child-friendly version of verse 58. I have adjusted the verse to be from a family point of view. I don't want the interconnections between being a good ruler and a good parent to be lost or diminish. Verse 58 goes this child-friendly, family-friendly one, and I call it a gentle guide. When parents are gentle and kind, the child feels healthy and happy. But when parents try to control too much, it causes problems. Children start to scheme and act selfishly. Sometimes, even in teenage years, good happens. But even in easier years, troubles do appear. Life is always just full of surprises. Who knows why? For what seems simple can suddenly become confusing. And what feels good can sometimes turn bad. It's hard to know what's coming next. That's why a wise parent leads gently without trying to control everything. They're smart, not hurtful, truthful, yet kind. They stay focused, but not fixated, just shining with a quiet, gentle light. Thank you for being with us today. This podcast is always an original work designed, written, and produced by many, including the good prep work of reader Kimberly Mason. Thank you. Thank you also to artist Audrey Davis and singer-songwriter Molly Hartwell. So everybody who produced this today is from Asheville. The copyright for quotations from Ching is held by Fortress Press. May your days begin rooted in sagely peace, so you may know and model a politics of hope, of which our world remains in great need.
Are you listening?